Welcome to our final Lunch and Learn session for the year 2015. It's been an eventful year and we've had a lot of great webinars. Today we're going to be looking at year-end processing tips and tricks for Stage 100. Excuse me. Our presenter is Mr. Robert Rusinello, one of our top consultants here at ISM. So with all of that, I am going to turn it over to Robert. And Robert, would you prefer to take questions during or at the end?
What we normally do is you can certainly house some questions in the chat window, and what I'll certainly do is at the end I'll circle back and start with the chat questions first. Sometimes I'll try and answer those questions as I'm working through the process, but otherwise I'll kind of hold it off until the end and try and answer them all at the end of the session. So.
Perfect. Thank you. With that, I'll turn everything over to you.
Great. Okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to be going through the year-end processing and review for Stage 100. This has been an eventful year because for folks that have payroll, Sage has introduced a bunch of programming geared towards ACA reporting. So I'll show you some resources that are available to you to help you get set up, as well as just kind of normal year-end processing to keep your system clean and ready for the new year. So with that, what we normally do is normally for end of the year processing, although this can be done at any time during the year, we typically will clean the system. For payroll, you have to essentially back up your company because the payroll files essentially get cleared at the end of the year when you run period end, as well as anytime you're running period end processing in your system, Mass will purge data. So what we like to do is before we process at the very least year end, we'll go ahead and create a backup of our company so that if we have to purge any type of AR or inventory data, that we at least have the information available in a backup company to reference prior to doing any type of purging. Okay, I'm going to go through the steps first, and we're going to go into the system and see how things are done. Okay. Step 2, clean and reconcile. Now the chance to clean your books. Of course, I'd like to think that this would be done throughout the year, but at the very least, once a year, it's a chance for us to make sure that our system is ticked and tied.
Okay, IT is done. Let me test it.
Okay. Thanks for muting. If you can, keep your phones on mute, and we'll open it up to questions at the end. In terms of cleaning your system, certainly you should be doing this periodically. Certainly on a month-end process, you should be reconciling your subledgers to your GL. Now, there's a whole host of reports in the system. You'll notice that what we normally have you run is your AR trial balance to tie to the GL AR account, your AP trial balance to tie to the GL AP account. Now the third one, you could run your valuation report or your trial balance and tie that to your inventory accounts at the GL. If you find that your valuation reports and your trial balances do not match, there are utilities that have to be run, and there's a process for bringing that information to balance. Most likely you'll be calling us to assist you with reconciling your inventory. But certainly on a monthly basis, you want to make sure that your valuation report or trial balance ties to your GL. And finally, make sure your purchase clearing report also ties to the GL. So these are reports in the subledger that you can use to keep your system nice and tidy. But at the very least, we certainly advise our clients at the end of the year to make sure that everything is ticked and tied. Now, I too mention before tying your balances out, make sure that your daily transaction registers have been posted. This is one area that sometimes we get calls from clients where their reports, their subledger reports do not tie. And the first place I actually look is have the daily transaction registers been posted. And I will jump into the system and show you real quick that what you can do to make sure your daily transaction registers have posted is you can go into the general ledger module, into main, and into daily transaction register. And this will have any unposted daily transaction registers for all of the modules. I'm going to hit preview. And since this is a demo company in the year 2020, we'll notice that we have some transactions here that have not hit the GL. They were run in the AR module, AT module, PO module, inventory module, but they're not showing up in the GL until I get this posted. So definitely before you start running your trial balances, you want to make sure that you don't have any transactions sitting unposted. And simply I can run the register, hit yes to update. And now if I try to go back into daily transaction register, I should see the file is empty. That tells me there's no more transactions sitting unposted. Now I can run my subledger reports and begin my reconciliation process. So now, continue to clean and reconcile. We'll be able to purge any obsolete POs. We'll be able to purge any obsolete SOs, and review your setup options to determine if they're adequate for the upcoming year. So if we go into the system, and we talk about purging SOs and POs, within the submodule, in the PO module, there is a utility. There's actually several utilities. Purge completed POs, purge expired master repeating orders, purge completed or canceled PO recap, purge obsolete purchase orders. So now, as POs are processed, they go into multiple statuses. So if you notice the order status over here says completed, it's either going to be open, back ordered, or completed. If a PO has a receipt of goods process but no receipt of invoice, Sage will put it in back order status. If the quantity received and quantity invoiced for all of your lines match, then it goes into completed status. Okay, and even though it's in completed status, it essentially stays in your system until you run period end processing and it gets purged. At any point in time prior to that, you can always go into utilities and purge completed POs. It'll ask you what day you want to purge, and it'll purge up to that point. Now, let's say that there is a PO that is in backorder status, but it's not valid anymore. Okay, this says that we have not invoiced 5, but it's an old PO, and it's showing up in our purchases clearing report, and you're sure that your purchases clearing report or your purchase clearing balance should be good. and you just want to get this off of the report, and you have invoiced it, everything is good, you just want to get rid of it. This is where we come in and we actually use the Purge Obsolete PO. We'll go into that utility, and we'll put today's date, and we'll select that specific purchase order number, although you could see that we can do a range, we can do a handful, and this Purge Obsolete PO will essentially get rid of that transaction. Now, we also do stress that if you have a situation where your purchase clearing report is not tied to your GL, it usually warrants us discussing first, and we can give you some ideas of the best way to clean up that process, because there could be ways to clean up your POs properly, but after all that's been done and you still have a PO showing up in that report, the very last step is to use this Purge Obsolete Purchase Order utility. We have a similar type utility in the SO module. Now, understand with sales orders, the normal process with sales orders is as orders get invoiced, they go into back order status, okay, over here. And then, of course, when the sales order is complete, it gets moved completely from sales order entry, and it goes into sales order quote history where you can review. Okay. However, there still is the ability to clean up just sales orders that you know will not come into fruition. They were entered, but they're just not going to be ordered again. And that's where you can come into the utility section and purge obsolete sales orders in a similar capacity that we just looked at with Purge Obsolete Purchase Orders. Excellent. As we continue, closing the modules. So this certainly is important for a lot of our users that are full distribution and manufacturing. Some of the modules actually write information to other modules. So what we've identified is this order of closing. You start with bill of materials, which closes the work order, closes the purchase order, sales order, inventory, all the way down to eventually the general ledger. Now, I do have another document that we've passed out to users in the past that actually goes through this process as well and talks about some of the reports that you run in each of the modules prior to performing year-end. And we can certainly email that to folks as needed. At the end of the session, I'm also going to show you a good resource in Sage that's going to have similar type information. But in this case, just understand that some of these modules, like purchase order, will write information to the AP system. Sales order would write information to the AR system. And as such, you want to close these modules prior to closing the modules downstream. Now, of course, I always tell folks before we start closing and running period end, we want to take a step back and look at our settings, because it's possible that your system was configured by someone else, and within each of the modules, and I'll use AR as an example. If we go to AR setup and AR options, and I go to history, I have settings for keeping history. I'm keeping cash receipts history to 99 years, and I'm keeping customer and salesperson history for 2 years. Now, of course, I can highlight this section and hit F1, And it's going to tell me what exactly is it keeping in history. Customer sales history includes sales dollars, cost of goods sold, sold dollars, cash receipts, finance charges, number of invoices, and so on. So understand that this is important because as we start closing our periods, what Sage is going to do is it's going to keep 2 years of customer history and salesperson history, and it will purge the rest. What we have found with some clients who get excited at year end and begin the process of purging data there have been times that these have been set to 0 to 2 or to 0. Now I don't believe I can set this less than 2, but there's some areas that could be set you know, to as little as 1 year or as little as 30 days. And without knowing, they've run period end processing in that module, and Sage has gone in and essentially removed or purged invoice history. Okay, I definitely implore you to at least take a look at all of your options before you start purging or running period end processing. Just safe to do it before and not after. The only thing we could do after that is for us to restore the information from backup. But this would certainly help us before we get to that point. So certainly it's worth reviewing the setup options prior to closing. Every options area with every module has a history button, and we can review this to make sure it's set up accordingly. Now we're going to get into some specific tasks within the modules that will be helpful when running year-end. In AP, certainly year-end processing is going to be looking mostly at 1099s. So prior to printing 1099s, you want to make sure that you have all of the correct information for 1099. As such, there is a report that gives us the needed information for 1099s. And if we go into AP and we go into reports, and we go into our payment history report, we can run this information. That's going to give us information for the whole year. And when we run it, we can identify essentially, I actually have it sorted by check, but we can actually sort this by vendor so that we can identify what we've paid to the vendor and make sure that our 1099 balances agree. Okay, so we've paid $66.13 to this vendor. At this point now, you can run your 1099 e-filing and reporting process via Atrix and at least ensure that your balances match. Now, you could run this report and actually go into vendor maintenance and find your 1099 vendors. Now in this case, when we set up a 1099 vendor in the system, we're going to tab number 2. We're setting this information up. We can go into 1099 history, and every time we cut a check for this vendor in the year, it's going to write to this table. So this is the information that gets pushed into Atrix for running 1099s. So running the payment history report will at least tell you what you've paid to the vendor throughout the year. You can come in here and make sure that these amounts balance prior to running your 1099 e-filing and reporting via Atrix. The IRD is needed before printing out 1099s. It's also needed before running W-2s. And also electronic reporting for 1099s. This has now been around for a couple of years. It used to be, of course, for our long-term users that you can run 1099s directly from Math or from Sage. A couple of years ago, that was finally changed over to Atrix. So currently, you have to go through the utility. Oops. I'll take a look at that with our W-2 reporting. We have to go through Atrix and run our e-filing and reporting wizard to run 1099. As we continue for payroll, we of course have to use Atrix or electronic reporting for W-2s. What we have found with our clients is that not only can they run W-2s, but they can run DE6s and DE7s. They can run 941s and 940s. So Atrix has been a wonderful tool for our users in that it grabs the information from Sage, puts it in the needed reports, and you can essentially file electronically or actually have Atrix print out the forms and file them for you. Now, with payroll, as I said initially, it is required that you back up your system prior to running year-end, because payroll will essentially reset and purge prior year's data. So if you needed to rerun W-2s or just research anything for the prior year, if you don't have a backup, you cannot view that information in the payroll module. At year-end, it removes it. So with that said, let me walk you through creating a backup in the system. In Library Master, under Main, Company Maintenance, we're going to create a company. Now our payroll clients typically will create something like P, and they'll call it P15, and we'll call it Payroll Year End 2015. And this will be done prior to running period and year-end processing. Over to the right, there's going to be a button that says Copy. And there it is. And it says a company record must be saved before it can be copied. We're going to hit yes. And the source company, I'm going to start with ABC, and it's going to become P15. Now, if you're just doing a payroll backup, you can unselect everything and just select payroll, and it's going to copy your payroll and GL information. If you're doing a full backup of the whole system, you can select everything and make a full backup prior to purging. For time's sake, I'm just going to do payroll. We're going to hit proceed. And in this case, it was very quick because I have a little bit of data. Now understand this is going to have to be done with folks out of the system, and this may take a while. We've seen it take, upwards of 5 to 15 minutes, depending on your data size. But now I have a backup of the system called P15. I can now go into company code P15 and essentially use it for printing out W-2s, printing out 1099s if I wanted to, and so on. Inventory tasks. So inventory can get hosed up throughout the year. So there are ways that we can essentially clean inventory. A couple of things that a lot of our clients don't really recognize is using the negative tier adjustment prior to running period end processing. What happens is in the system, let me show you, in the ABC company, if you are a FIFO, LIFO, lot serial user, and we go into the inventory module, and we see this is a FIFO item, we can go to tab number 7, and here we have 0 quantity lots. This is a FIFO item, so of course as we sell this inventory, it will relieve inventory on a first in, first out basis. These tiers will stay in your system in perpetuity. Okay. If you are a large inventory user, you will have a lot of 0 quantity tiers that will show up in your valuation report, in your trial balance, in your history report. So at year end, it's just advisable to clear these 0 quantity tiers out so that you just don't have extra information. I call it, redundant information that's sitting in the system. What we can do is in inventory under utilities, there is a utility called remove 0 quantity costing tiers. We can run it. We'll select today's date. Or actually, if you're doing it for year end, you can use 12/31/2015. I always tell folks some of these utilities really could be run on a monthly basis. You don't have to run it just at year end. But once you run it, it will go out and remove that information accordingly. Okay, so certainly a utility for us to use. Another thing that I'll mention, cutoff procedures are critical to performing a physical count. Make sure you've processed all your receipt of goods and posted all your invoices prior to freezing, or your physical count adjustment will be wrong. This is really just so that we're comparing apples to apples. In the system, of course, running physical count is done very simply. We go into physical count, go to physical count worksheet, and we can print worksheet and freeze items for everything, for a cycle, for a warehouse. Typically at year end, you're doing the full physical, so you're going to run it for everything. What this physical count worksheet does is it actually writes the quantity on hand information to another table, so that when you enter your physical count, it will compare your physical counts to the numbers that were frozen. So it is imperative that if you have inventory that just came in from your warehouse on 12/31, and it's 2015 inventory, and you're going to count it in your physical count, that you are sure that the receipt of goods for that shipment has been processed. Because if you do a physical count and you include that in your count, okay, and Sage does the adjustment, and then you separately do a receipt of goods after the fact, you have now double counted that inventory. Not good. So certainly cutoff procedures are important when doing a physical count. One more thing on the GL, you can keep the GL open through the following year without any issues other than non-financial accounts. If your budget is not already entered, you'll have until January financials to do so. If you're running budget to actual reports, that gives you through January to essentially enter in your budget. Budgets can be entered in either through VI importing or through general ledger, utilities, and general ledger exchange. If you need help with importing budgets, of course, you can always ask us and we can help you. Either go through one of those two mechanisms. And again, when we discuss keeping the GL open other than non-financial accounts, that just means that if we go into general ledger setup, and we go into general ledger options, this is telling us that our system is currently in the year 2020-01. Of course, if you have audit adjustments that don't come in until February, March, as long as your GL person is the only person that has control to the GL module, you can certainly keep this open to get those adjustments in. I will mention from the GL side, if you're already in March, okay, of 2020, and you have those audit adjustments and you want to do a journal entry in your system, you could come in and go back into GL options with everyone out of the system. Go ahead and change your fiscal year, fiscal period accordingly. Go ahead and enter in your adjustments, post it, and then you can come back in here and simply put it back to the current period you are in. Okay, there's no need to run period end, year end processing again, as it's really just not needed. We can come in and change the fiscal year and period, and all is good. Now, the mechanism for running period end, year end processing and all the modules is fairly consistent. Every module has a period end folder, and it has a period end processing task. We can run period end reports when we're running period end processing. Chances are you have run reports out of the module prior to that point, so running this is a bit redundant if you have. Otherwise, Sage does give you ability, and I would say for our smaller users, you could probably go through this route of printing it while you're closing it. But our large users are probably running these reports prior to closing it, and thus at this point, really all you're doing is hitting proceed and running period end. When we hit proceed, of course, in some of the modules, it's telling us we haven't run allocations. Are we sure we want to do this? In my system, I'm going to hit yes. Of course, if you have allocations, you certainly want to run them prior to running your year-end process. And it's just telling us it's going to move the system from period 1 to period 2. And it is going to purge data according to our options, our setup options. So of course, again, it's important to review those prior to running period end processing so that you don't erroneously purge data that you needed. And I will mention this year with payroll specifically, there is a whole host of changes to the system regarding the Affordable Care Act. There is some new module options, both in this folder and in employee maintenance. I'm going to show you in a minute some good resources. I don't know if we can essentially explain this process in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes, but there is a wonderful set of resources in Sage City. I think it takes about maybe probably about 30 to 45 minutes to go through the resources, and it goes through each of these options in detail, as well as really the Affordable Care Act in general. goes through ALE, essentially what constitutes a large employer, 50 or more employees, and the different tax forms that a large employer has to file, 1094 and 1095 B and C, and understand that those forms are now available through Atrix, so that when you run federal e-filing and reporting, those options are available. Now, in this demo system, if you'll notice, if I click on federal e-filing and reporting, I have all of my tax forms for Atrix. So we can print out 940s, 941s, even 941Xs. We can print out our W-2s. Now, this process for 1099s and for federal e-filing is essentially a wizard. Once I select the form I want to use, I hit accept, and it goes out, and it actually stopped me initially, tell me that I'm missing an EIN, and it'll stop me right off the bat. Let me go ahead and populate that right now. And, oops, let's go to our 2015 W-2 forms are not there yet. And understand with Atrix, if you have installed Atrix on your machines, then you should be good to go. At the beginning of the year, as we start getting W-2 forms updated via Atrix, you're going to end up having to download the updates, get those forms available on your system. If you have multiple users using Atrix, each user's workstation is going to have to update. It's probably about a 1 to 3 minute process, and there will be a window shortly that will indicate if I have to update my form. And I think my system is just a bit slow with my connection, especially with this seminar. But at this point, it's trying to go out to Atrix and find the forms needed for me to run. Just a little slow. Okay, I'll let that run. Essentially, what it's doing, it's going out into Sage, getting the information, and then going out to Atrix and getting us ready for the wizard. Now, we do have other YouTube videos in terms of going specifically through the Atrix wizard. I'll just kind of touch on this very briefly in that it's going to walk us through step by step how to process the W-2. It's going to walk us through the FEIN. It's going to walk us through the contact information. Let's see. There we go. And of course, it's going to yell at us at all levels if we don't have the needed information. It's going to ask us what type of preparer we are. It's going to ask us if we have any type of folks exempt from W-2s and what our control boxes are. And of course, we don't have any W-2s for 2014. We were in 2020. So, but nonetheless, that wizard will essentially walk us through the information needed to create a W-2, and then from there, Atrix will take over and will allow us to either print the W-2s, or we can actually have them printed on our behalf, of course, at a cost. they can also print and file the W3 and electronically file if needed. With that said, let me also tell you that Sage City on Sage's site is a wonderful resource. There is a year-end center that not only has the product and tax table updates, it has information on what to do via payroll. It also has information on checklists for the different modules. As I mentioned, if we go into payroll and we go into view articles, one level deep, we're actually going to get into ACA videos. This is a 5 to 6 part series that discusses the ACA in detail, probably about 30 to 40 minutes in length, and really goes into how to configure the system for ACA reporting. Understand that for ALEs or large employers, 1094s and 1095s are going to start becoming due at the end of January, so certainly we'll want to have the system ready to go to print those out by the end of January. But even beyond that, everything that we've covered certainly is available in this year-end center. There was one more piece of information that I know we've given out in the past, and we can certainly do so with this group. I'll provide this to Sherry. This is a handout that goes through how to create a company. It also goes through really the closing procedures and maybe discussing the specific reports that should be run for each of the modules. So I've given this out to clients before, and I think it's a good resource that kind of encapsulates what we've discussed. Now, one other option or one other item I will mention, because we did have an email go out last week that discusses the fact that for ACA reporting and for Atrix, what Sage has done is essentially roll a lot of their final program adjustments for the Affordable Care Act into the latest service pack. So for us to be able to install the IRD, the tax tables, we will have to be on a current service pack, and certainly that could take some planning. So if you have any questions on installing the service pack, we normally assist clients with installing the service pack. So certainly you can email support, especially if you're a payroll customer, and make sure that you are, or that we set up a time where we can assist you with installing the latest product update, as well as the IRD and the tax table updates. Normally that, we assist clients toward the end of the year. If you're not a payroll client and you're doing 1099, that certainly can wait until January. But if you need help with that, certainly let us know so that we can at least get it on the calendar and allocate resources accordingly.
I'd like to jump in there, Robert. One thing to note is please do check with our support department. You can email them at support@goism.com. Please do check with them, because some third-party applications or add-ons and any custom modifications that you may have may be affected by the IRD install, and that's something we'll be able to determine in reviewing your system. Also, the final IRDs, according to my latest information, are due out between the 18th and the 21st of this month, so they've not even been fully released by Sage yet. So we are getting people on the calendar and on the schedule so that we can get these installed as soon as possible.
Excellent. And with that said, I will open the floor to questions either through the chat window or Sherry, if you want to open the lines, we can certainly address them.
All lines are open, so any questions, please feel free to chat or ask your questions. If you do want to receive one of the handouts that Robert discussed, please email me. You can email me at am for account manager, am@goism.com. When you email me that, I will send those out once I receive them or later today. Any questions? Okay, well, if you do want to review, we will be posting this presentation on our YouTube channel. You can reach that YouTube channel by clicking on the YouTube icon under any of our signatures on our emails. So if you do want to review or show this to someone else in your firm, that will be out on our YouTube channel by the end of this week. With that, Robert, I want to thank you for a great presentation. We wish everyone the happiest of holidays. ISM will be closed Christmas Eve and Christmas Day for the holidays and New Year's Day following that. Any questions, please reach out to am@goism.com. Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.